Do you, this is something I've thought about doing, but
Mhm.
I don't, but like, do you either record people, when you're like at like, let's say you're at a cafe and
Mhm.
you hear like two people having a conversation and you can actually hear what they're saying and the way they're saying it. And you're like, oh, I like how they're phrasing things. So do you like record or do you like
I make
write
notes.
down? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, I'll make notes on my phone if I hear something interesting from, like, a a context point of view, right? Like, if somebody has a fun way or an interesting way of phrasing things, be like, "Oh, that's kind of fun," and I'll make a little quick note of what they said or how they said it, just to kind
Mm,
of trigger that in my mind. I also love to pick up if people have, like, a catchphrase they don't realize they have, right? Because a lot of
mm,
times people do. They say something, but it's so natural to them that they almost don't know that they do it. And I
yes.
love to kind of hear those and be like, "Ooh, that's interesting. That could be an interesting texture to a character to have them sort of use that repeatedly because then it becomes part of who they are." And it's those kinds of things I find really it makes somebody feel more real too because
Yes.
everybody be like, "Oh, yeah, like, I get people that do that," or, "I know a person that would say that," or, repeat themselves in that way, and that's how you can start to make very different and very interesting characters based on real people loosely, right? Like, you're not like, "Hi, what's your name? I'm gonna base character on you," but it's like, "Oh, you use that phrase in a really interesting way. I'm gonna make a note of that." So
Yeah. Well, that is true. There are people I notice it within myself when there's words that I use, and also when you're around people like your
mhm.
significant other and they have a phrase that they'll use over and over and over again.
Yeah.
You pick either when you're having so in the case of like going back to the Grey's Anatomy thing, sometimes when you're that's a I guess a trick you can use for people that are very familiar with each other is that they may replicate the way that they talk, right? The
Yeah.
phrases that somebody if you're in a married if you've been married for years, you kinda can talk very similarly, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, and it's actually really interesting because I do pay a lot of attention to how people talk, what they say, how they sound, I'll find myself picking up on people's nuances and I'll start doing it. And I'll be like, oh, I never said that phrase before, but now it's just worked its way into my vocabulary. And especially if it's somebody who has something that's kind of interesting, like they're from a different country or, I've worked a lot with people from Australia and they'll have really interesting ways of saying things. And sometimes those end up kind of getting baked into your vernacular too, right? You're like, oh, well, I never really thought of calling it that cutesy thing, but now that's how I refer to it. And
Mhm.
it's it is really great for character building to have those little subtleties that you obviously don't want to overdo it to the point where like we get it, that person likes to use that phrase, but enough that you're sort of person feels grounded in reality. They don't feel like they're just a sticker put on top of something else, which can happen a lot. Characters can become flat really easily, especially if they all kind of sound the same.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all gotta be very, like, if you are a study of human beings to
Hmm.
constantly be, like, thinking about ways to add it's to make characters feel lived, like,
Yeah.
alive, lived in, like, that like, that's one of those things where I I I always find it that, like, I don't consider myself like, I've written a lot, and I wouldn't say, like, I'm like a, writer in the sense
Hmm.
where that's the thing that I identify myself as.
Hmm.
I identify myself really mainly as an artist, but I do write,
Hmm.
and I am aware of those things where, like, you have to make sure, the characters are different from each other in the way they speak. It's a little bit easier for me, though, if I'm because I'm like, let's call myself a cartoonist, a writer, and an artist,
Yeah.
where I have the characters can do some of the work for me visually. The way they move, the way that they,
100%.
dress and things like that give me some keys that advantages that, somebody else who's just purely doing prose wouldn't have, which is to your point of like, we were saying earlier in this conversation, where if it's not necessary for me to describe, I may not say anything about it. Whereas like I have to draw the whole thing, right? There's
Yeah.
not, I have to draw that little ring, the earring in the nose, even
Yeah.
though it may never get mentioned in the actual story at any point, but it's there and people can see it and they understand this is the kind of character that would have a nose ring, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, I
so,
think that's also where it's always so interesting when you do have some kind of a visual with your words, right? And telling a story with the picture of the character and the setting there that you don't have to, subtly describe it over the course of whatever. It's like, this is who it is, this is the room they're in, let's move on, right? Like, let's just get into it. It's a huge advantage. And it also removes any of what we talked about of people misinterpreting something and assuming, be like, oh, I just assumed they had dark curly hair and you're telling me they had spiky red hair? Like, what? That's not what I pictured at all. You remove that by having them drawn right there. And even the things we talked about like Sam and things that are not necessarily important to mention, but they help with the character when, the clothes don't fit quite right. And, the stuff is kind of broken down and old and doesn't look like it's new. And like Sam, you can tell they kind of down on their luck. Those are things that might not have to mention it, but you can see it, right? Like, we don't have to go into a whole long story about, like, before Sam arrived at this apartment, he had just, been dumped by his girlfriend and this and that. It's like, you just look at him and be like, oof, this guy's having a rough go. And that's the beauty of having the visual to go along with the story.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I think that, that there are those advantages that the artist has, but I do recommend that, artists write as much as they can because
Hmm.
it gives you a good idea of like, if you work with a writer,
Hmm.
what would is required from the writing point of view,
Yep.
right? Like to make sure that, again, going back to the world building, like what are some words that
Hmm.
you would use to describe things that are different from the way that we describe things in modern times. And
Yeah.
so then it'll help hopefully for you to envision the visual part of it, right? So I think that there are benefits to trying these things out, even if it's not something that you're like, oh, I for sure love the writing process. I want to keep on doing it. It could just be, a scenario where um, you just understand how it's done, and therefore, now, uh, it'll help you in the whole team building, right?
Absolutely, and it also helps you to know what you need to be briefed, right? So you know what kind of questions to ask. Be like, "Have you thought about this? Have you seen this?" If the writer doesn't immediately give you that information, am I free to make up what the room looks like, or have you in your mind visualized something important I need to know? Because sometimes you could initially just start being like, "Oh, okay, I get it," and just start drawing, and it's like, "Oh, sorry, I probably should have mentioned that it's actually a castle, not an apartment." It's like, "Oh, that would have been helpful to know." But the more you can look at it and know what's missing and know what is necessary or be able to pick out interesting things, be like, "Ooh, okay, since you mentioned they're down on their luck and they're this and that," then from a visual side of it, you're like, maybe I'll make all their clothes a little bit misfitting. And suddenly it's like that's a really great representation of the idea in a visual way.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so just, kind of go back to this,
Mhm.
what I'm working on here. So I have, if you've been watching, I have changed things a little bit.
Mhm.
Uh, so I haven't done the top part, but I'll probably keep, I think that's probably going to stay pretty much the same, the overview. But then, the panel one or panel two, it's pretty much the same, although I blocked in, that the window is a little bit more, the light from the window is a little bit more pronounced here. So it
Mhm.
kind of gives a little bit more of an ominous look, I think,
Mhm.
uh, as Sam is carrying a box. And then we have, I went back to the
I saw.
drawing board.
Yeah.
And I mean, it actually does capture a lot of what was initially the
Yeah.
thing I liked about what I was working on, in that last, episode or the last show we did together, which was I wanted to have the character kind of, pulling on it in a certain way,
Mhm.
Uh, but I actually went back to the original way we had done it. And so I'm kind of like taking bits of what we did last time and then
Yeah.
taking some of what we did originally and melding them together. So the character now is like at an angle where they're doing this
Yep.
versus it's not straight on. Um, the baggy clothing is much more prevalent here, right?
Mhm.
It's a little bit more of like an obvious thing, and I'm actually gonna use, like, the hand thing where I have them, like,
Yeah.
actually yanking, right, that kinda so, like, there's a lot of things that I used
Mhm.
from the one prior and added to the one that we're currently working on, and
Yep.
anyway, I feel like this is a bit closer, again, to, how I think I want the energy to feel.
Mhm.
It's not as, uh intense in some ways, but it's also, um, I just feel like it's a little closer to the way I envisioned it. What are your thoughts?
I like it. I think it still holds. The biggest thing for me was the body being confused by the fact that it should have been an easy motion and it wasn't, right? And I love that, like, holding the arm because, again, you walk up to a door, you assume it's gonna open, you go to pull it and it doesn't open, and I think that that's what that's showing is that attempt, and which was exactly what we wanted to get out of this panel, so I think it's working.
So then the other thing that as I said before, I changed um, the angle of the phone and
Mhm,
in the first panel 4 there, but
mhm,
then, in panel 5, I it's a little bit different from the original one. The hand that they're using is different for the phone cradle or for the main part of the phone. But it's a similar kind of, like, action of instead of they were clicking with their finger, they're just putting it back in the cradle because 'cause
yep,
they're like it's not intense, it's like, "Huh, okay," that
yeah,
kinda thing. But it's still I think it's the same thing. And
yep,
then now this one here, the last panel, where prior it was let me bring it back up. Uh, yeah, there we go. It was
mhm,
this. So it was a little bit more of a further afield, like
yep.
encompassing the whole room. Um, this one that I'm doing is closer. What are your thoughts? Like, do you feel does it still work, or should I zoom out? Like, what do you?
I like it, and I like that it's on an angle, right? Like,
Yeah.
like, I like that it's not a straight on shot. It feels everything feels a little disorienting in a good way, right? Like, it's almost like everything Sam just thought he was moving into a new apartment, and suddenly this door has become a looming presence in the background, and I like the way that you drew this one.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
it just a little bit more of an immediate thought where I was like, "You know what? I will see what it looks like to change this up a little bit just
Mhm.
because, um, seeing it, I've thought about it a little bit more. The story has developed since we did
Yep.
these original thumbnails. So I want to make sure that I'm adapting to the thing that I feel. So it's still very rough. So really, at the end of the day, the difference between the thumbnails and this, as I said prior, I probably would have done this in thumbnail version. I
Right.
probably would have been a lot more. I would have figured some of this stuff out, but because of the way that we're doing this, I'm trying things a little bit differently than I would normally, right?
Mhm.
I mean, there's just no way around it. I never have somebody that I talk to while I draw. Like that's the big thing. There's never going to ever be anything, in the same way I do my process when I have somebody that I'm like, "So what do you think about this panel?" You're like, yeah, that could work," or
Yeah, when it's
"Try this,"
constantly yeah.
you know? So I might as well try the things I wouldn't normally do, right?
Yeah,
Um, it
absolutely.
doesn't really change the fact that, like I'm still using, lots of the same kinds of practices,
Mhm,
methods of working that I normally would. I'm just really trying to, like I'm just trying to make the best story I can and do it the best way I can. But I'm attempting it slightly differently. And here's the thing, like I it isn't that strange for me to do this kind of stuff anyway, because I normally always change up my process slightly, right?
Mhm.
I don't know about you. Do you? And this we can
Always.
start wrapping it up because I
Yeah.
think I'm almost done, at least with this part that I want to get to here. But do you constantly change up your process of writing? Like, are you pretty much, is it pretty much like built in that you're this is the way you've done it and you don't really deviate too much from it?
I change it up constantly, and partly because I write so many different things, right? Like, if I was purely like, I write, high fantasy, this is how I do it. I sit, I have my process, but I'm constantly switching hats and I do so many different things. And I'm always learning from other people and evolving and, trying different stuff out. So, like you, I have a process that I use, but I'm not married to it in any stretch. I am happy to try different things and sometimes completely change my process if something's working.
Right, and I mean, you and I having worked together, obviously,
Mhm.
we've changed the way that
Yeah.
you approach things. Because 'cause you've never done prior to working with me, you've never done, like, a comic book before, right?
Nope. Nope,
So
comic books weren't something that I had done, a lot of. I'd done a lot of stuff with visuals, but not in this format. So it's, yeah, and that's again learning a totally different way of working with people and embracing it. I think that's one of the things too. If you want to work in different formats, you need to be willing to learn what comes into that format, how it works, where you can bend the rules, where you should stick to them. You have to understand the genre, the rules, all that kind of stuff, before you try and break any. You can't just come in with a crashing ball being like, "This is how I do things," because that's probably not gonna work too well.
yeah, well, you were very I mean, when it came to, like, doing the comic, you were very
Mhm.
open to critique
Yeah.
and
Absolutely. I
you
wanted to
weren't.
learn and because I wanted to do it well, which meant I'm not the expert. Please tell me, for one, how you would like me to show things, how you would like me to critique things, all that kind of stuff, because that was the only way I was going to get better at it was from learning from somebody who does it and does it well. So
Yeah,
it's a good thing if you're starting out, be willing to take the criticism and listen.
yeah,
So,
for sure.
but well, thank you for joining us. So, as we finish almost to the end of page one, which is very exciting. So, make sure you've subscribed, that you're following along. You catch our live episodes, you catch up on our recaps, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.